Howdy guys, Attorney Walter and I just wanted to catch up with you. We had some major technology issues. First off, I couldn't get the video to load. I couldn't get the thumbnail to load. I couldn't get any of the details to just go up. Bottom line is that then I went to go into using it and click the control panel button, and the launch control area disappeared. There was no button for it. So we are starting a little bit late, no worries, but I want to go through real quick with you. This is our bigger night. This is usually when we do about a 2-hour video. That's where people get to call in, ask questions, things like that. Just as a heads up, we're not going to be doing a full 2 hours tonight because I do have to go ahead and do a couple of things after this for the law firm. Let's get right into it, though. Please remember to like, subscribe, and leave 5-star reviews. Let's get right into it. Here we go. This is from LINC Incorporated, specifically did an article on disability in history, U.S. presidents. And the reason why I'm doing this video is that I was starting to look at essentially U.S. presidents throughout time who had impairments. I wanted to kind of do a quick overview of that. I know we're running low on time. And as a result of that, something else came up that I thought was interesting, which is basically essentially a study or a review or an analysis as an opinion piece as to, Joe Biden being our first unabashedly disabled president. And so I started reading on that. I was like, oh, I didn't know, And I started reading through it. And I was like, well, okay, let's go through that real quick. So let's go through this. Let's begin the process, and then we'll get going. Here we go. So this is the article. If you think that Franklin D. Roosevelt, and that's who we all think of as a disabled president, was the only United States president with a disability, think again. Our nation has a distinguished line of presidents with a variety of visible and non-visible disabilities, from epilepsy to hearing impairments to learning disabilities. For most of these men, speaking publicly about their disability was discouraged during their lifetime. And that's true. We would never see photos or videos of a president in a disabled state because people just wouldn't vote for that person. They would be like, well, that person's not up to the task. But now as a society, we're much more open to it. Okay. For most of these men, speaking publicly about their disability was discouraged during their lifetime. Today, we honor them for overcoming the challenges they faced as individuals with disabilities and for leading and serving our country. William Jefferson Clinton, Bill Clinton, 1946, hearing impaired. Okay, he was the 42nd president of the United States, 1992 to 2000, wears hearing aids. Number 2, Dwight D. Eisenhower, 1890 to 1969, learning disability. 34th president of the United States, 1953 to 1960, leader of the victorious Allied forces in Europe during World War II. Thomas Jefferson, 1943 to 1826, had a learning disability, which is hard to believe because it's Thomas Jefferson that we're talking about. 3rd president of the United States, 1801 to 1809, author of the Declaration of Independence, remembered as a great president, a diplomat, political thinker, and founder of the Democratic Party, reported to have many learning difficulties. John F. Kennedy. I mean, if you want to talk about image, this is a person who essentially was like the ultimate image. Him on a yacht, sailing, the style, the clothing. Howdy, howdy, Leanne. Howdy, howdy, Benny Hill. And what it really means is that at the end of the day, what we've got here are individuals who appeared to be one person, but weren't actually that one person. Let's keep rolling. So John F. Kennedy, 1917 1963, had a learning disability, chronic back pain. 35th president of the United States, 1960 to 1963. That's when a lot of the cool cars were coming out. The youngest man ever elected president and the youngest ever to die in office. Won world respect as the leader of the free world. Abraham Lincoln. I know, and a lot of people, you guys are thinking, this is an individual that's surprising. Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865. Major Depression. Again, Major Depression. He was the 16th president from 1860 to 1863, suffered from severe, incapacitating, and occasional suicidal depression, also thought to have Marfan syndrome, which is basically, we'll go through that later because we've got to keep going. But the bottom line is this gentleman had mental impairments, yet wrote some of the most moving, incredible, things, speeches. He was a lawyer. I mean, incredible person. So it's just hard, to understand that the best of the best had these things kind of pulling against them as they ascended up to the top of the ladder. James Madison, 1751 to 1836, had epilepsy. 4th president, 1809 to 1817, drafted the Bill of Rights, often referred to as the father of the Constitution. So somebody obviously Space Constitution, somebody I look to obviously for understanding and better appreciating the United States Constitution, how it's formed, etc. Okay. Now let's see. He played a leading role in the Constitutional Convention of 1787, where he helped design the checks and balances system that equalizes the roles of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of the government. He also created the federal system. So imagine just back in the day, a person with a disability helped create the Constitution, our three branches of government, the federal government system in its basic origin, and kept moving things forward and moving things forward and moving things forward. That's just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. All right, next thing, Ronald Reagan, 1911 to 2000, 1911 to 2004, hearing impairment, kind of like Bill Clinton. 40th President of the United States, 1980 to 1988. Also served 2 terms as governor of California. In 1932, became a radio announcer for WOC in Davenport, Iowa, and later WHO in Des Moines, Iowa. In 1937, he signed a contract with Warner Brothers, and his first film was Love Is on the Air. 16th President, 1860. Oh, sorry. I will skip this over. All right, next president, Franklin D. Delano Roosevelt, 1882 to 1945. 32, he had polio. 32nd President of the United States, 1933 to 1945, promised to create jobs for the unemployed and gave assistance to needs, suffered with polio, and worked very hard to hide the extent of his disability conditions. Theodore Roosevelt, visual impairment, 1858 to 1919. He was the 26th President of the United States, 1901 to 1909. Founder of the Progressive Party, an avid boxer, he suffered a severe blow to the head that detached his retina and led to blindness in the affected eye. Okay. Now, many of you don't know this, and this is incredibly important, but the origin of the United States when it comes to presidents, George Washington himself, a Mason, 1732 to 1799, had a learning disability, one of the wealthiest men back then. Okay. It's kind of odd stuff here. It's just hard to believe that they could achieve all these big things. He was the first president of the United States, 1789 and 1797, was unable to spell throughout his life, and his grammar usage was very poor, thought to have learning disabilities. Okay, so nobody has an exact, because, back then, who knows? But he basically could not spell. Think about that. George Washington couldn't spell, likely because of a learning disability. Woodrow Wilson, 1856 to 1924, learning disability. He was the 28th President of the United States, 1913 to 1921, had a stroke toward the end of his term that left him partially paralyzed. Known to have dyslexia, World War I leader, awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for Versailles Treaty, 1919. Domestic reforms included 1914 creation of the Federal Reserve. All right, now that's kind of your classic list of those presidents who are essentially who were disabled, who were essentially achieving the highest level of government, the highest position in the United States, the person who is in control of our entire war machine, our federal system, overseeing the states. They had impairments all the way from George Washington, who could not basically, write, to essentially maybe even a more modern pick. Let me give an example. When I was searching about president disability news and things like that, something odd popped up. Now, granted, this is from a highly left-leaning paper, so just as you understand that as a reality. Houston Press, Joe Biden, our first unashamedly disabled president. This is from Jeff Rauner, November 10th, 2020. I thought this was an interesting article because this is like, all the way back to 2020 at the very end of it in November. So here we go. At the height of everything. Okay. One of the most emotional moments of the 2020 election cycle came during the Democratic National Convention. Amid all the stars and political bigwigs was 13-year-old Braden Harrington, who in an emotional video talked about how President-elect Joe Biden had shared tips with him on dealing with his stutter. The two had met at a New Hampshire rally in February when Biden was still vying for the nomination. It was really amazing to hear that someone like me became vice president, right? So a child was stuttering. The then vice president, who then became president, gave him ideas of how to go ahead and, work with that. He told me about a book of poems by Yeats he would read out loud to practice, he said in this video. He showed me how he marks his addresses to make them easier to say out loud. So I did the same thing today, and now I'm here talking to you today about the future, about our future. Biden had started throughout his life, which is quite a disability to have when your job often involves speaking with authority. As the ugliness of the presidential campaign season ramped up, many used Biden's speaking patterns to accuse the 77-year-old statesman of mental incapacity. It was ableist garbage that had no place in the discourse, but still found root in the talking points of the cruel. It also reinforced traditional stereotypes of people with stutters, something Biden is well aware of despite of his lofty ascension. Now remember, this article it's going to attack the other side. It's an opinion piece. That's not the important part. The important part is they are recognizing essentially stuttering and saying this is an impairment. Now, where is it on par to these other types of impairments versus severity? Obviously George Washington, with the inability to go ahead and write, obviously, Roosevelt, obviously these other individuals who have these really severe impairments that limit their ability to walk, to see, to be able to, do functional tasks at a much higher level. But the thing is, for this president, what's interesting is that to some degree, right, his job is heavily, heavily reliant on his ability to go ahead and give addresses and talk about things, which is kind of interesting because when you look at it in the disability system that we currently use, element 4 and 5 are all about, can this person do their past work or other jobs in the national economy? And so his main job is directly in conflict with what his impairment kind of holds on to him with, and it pulls on him and makes him have a difficult time pushing forward. So that was interesting. We're going to talk more about that. So statement here, it has nothing to do with your intelligence quotient. It has nothing to do with your intellectual makeup. Biden said once in a CNN town hall, stuttering when you think about it is the only handicap that people still laugh about, that still humiliates people about, and they don't even mean to. So it was an interesting point. Now, with that said, obviously Biden has had to some degree some pretty big slip-ups that were not stuttering, which he gets attacked on, and some of them rightfully so. But what I think is interesting here is that throughout a pretty big timeline, nobody really knew that this stuttering was a thing for President Biden at that point, Vice President Biden at that point previously, all through his political career. The new commander-in-chief's openness about his disability is actually quite a first. America has had disabled presidents before. The most famous case is Franklin Roosevelt, who often used a wheelchair or leg braces because a childhood case of polio had left walking painful and difficult. These days, Roosevelt is openly portrayed as disabled in statues and Hollywood films. But that was not the case when he was alive. No picture of me getting out of the machine, boys, he would famously say to press covering him as he would get out of the car with leg braces on. The press obliged, and though the country was mostly aware of the disability, everyone was careful to make sure FDR never looked disabled. Interesting. A different time, right? He wasn't the only one. John Kennedy had Addison's disease, a condition of the adrenal gland that leads to extreme fatigue, joint pain, and weight loss. He had his physicians work hard to keep the disease under wraps, even when opponents accused him of having it. Biden, by contrast, has no problem speaking at length about his disability and the prejudice he sometimes experiences because of it. He is unashamedly open about how it has affected his life and what mechanisms he uses to cope with it. The toll it takes on him is very apparent to anyone who has watched speeches with him since summer. When it becomes clear opposition forces, we're going to lean into the idea of Biden as mentally incompetent. So the point here is this, and the article just goes on in the same sort of light and the same sort of ideology with it. What I want to ask you guys is, essentially, when it comes to these politicians, are we now open as a society to any particular individual taking on the role? Now, what do I mean by that? I mean race, I mean gender, I mean some preference that might not be the mainstream, could be a religious preference. I mean impairments, disabilities. So what you have to think about here is that basically, at the end of the day, these impairments, these disabilities, yeah, they're supposed to be accepted. Yeah, they're supposed to be something that we align with, are okay with. But the bottom line is that we're still not at that point where we accept them as something that's okay. Let me give you an example. If I, as an attorney, was limited in some way, fashion, or form that you guys thought would slow me down from winning your claim, you wouldn't want to hire me if I was disabled and unable to show my capacity to other attorneys who could do something maybe faster, more efficiently, whatever. But at the same time, as a disabled attorney who had his hand crushed as a child, my right hand specifically, I can tell you this, as somebody who can't type for more than 2 to 3 hours without having problems where it'll pus up and my finger will start bleeding through all the. The point is, at the end of the day, most people don't know that because I would hide that fact because I knew people weren't going to hire me if they thought that I had some sort of limitation. So it then begs the question, to what degree are we hiding things from people as disabled individuals? Which then begs the question of how many individuals in America, right? Are hiding something so that some position, something down the line will be available to them. Because if they were to go ahead and make notice on people of their limitations, of their impairments, they wouldn't necessarily get the job. Think about that. It's not just the blue collar work stuff where you got to shovel, you got to use a heavy machine, have all the options available for moving, this arm and this arm and this lever and this lever. It's not just that stuff. It's all the way through. Let's say somebody wanted to be, in a position such as, air traffic controller, right? Would you allow that person to have a mental impairment? Would you allow a person in that position to have a physical impairment? Where do we cut it off? Right? Where's the cut? Well, if these men, right, could be president of the United States, surely they could be able to do that job, right? Right? And then we get into this whole questioning situation. At what point is a disability too severe for that job? Which then brings us right back to the Social Security system, element 4. At what point are you unable to do that job because your impairment is too severe for it? Some jobs are, they require a lot. Air traffic controller, attorneys, accountants, doctors, president of the United States. But think about it. The first president couldn't even spell. It's kind of weird, right? One of the wealthiest men in the nation at that time couldn't spell. So my point to you guys is this. Like, let's say that I had, for example, some form of a mental ADHD or something like that, and that was hidden for all of these years as a result of maybe one day I wanted to run for something or be a judge or whatever. The point is, we all hide things about ourselves because we do not know what the future holds for us. And as a result of that, we are fearful for people to think that there's anything wrong with us, which might hinder us from taking on the role that we might one day take on. So another thing I'd like to go through is when you look at these as to which was the most severe impairment or disabling condition out of all the presidents, I don't think stuttering's up there. I don't think basically the physical impairments are the winners here. I think the winner would be a learning impairment that would limit you to the point where you couldn't basically write. To me, that would be a massive. I mean, for the like if you take Biden would stutter through. But imagine if President Biden couldn't even write one of his speeches or one of the statutes that he wants to present forward and go forward with. So the point here is this, guys. That I think is important to think about. I think the Social Security disability system we currently have, basically, Hey Guardian, I don't know what the deal is, but when I had the system up before to do the original video, it wouldn't let me log into it. It's like YouTube locked me out. So I restarted it. I cut that one out and restarted it. But kind of the bottom line is this is the video. I know it's not that many people like it usually is, but no biggie. I mean, once it publishes, it'll go up. But so anyways, guys, that's kind of my point here, which is, at what point do we accept that disabled people might be able to do jobs that we initially didn't think they could do? And at what point do we accept that if we give somebody a job, somebody who doesn't really want to do the job might do a worse job than somebody who's disabled and really wants to do the job? And it all comes down to like effort and desire and this emotional context of attaching to it. Because look, our first president couldn't even write. I mean, our entire country was part of a founding by somebody who couldn't write. Now, sure, you had other brilliant men and women back then, the Constitution, Declaration of the Independence, etc. But my point is still, doesn't that warp your mind to think the first president could not pick up a pen and write out a full speech? To me, that's just, and we must have come a very long way. But then think about it. All these other people could write back then. But at the same time, during that timeline, it was only usually the aristocrats, the wealthy, who had a higher education at that level. Most kids now that finish high school had a higher education than most, if not, 99 whatever percent plus of those way back in the day. It was structured. They knew what to learn. They had the books. They kept going. So bottom line is, yeah, everybody talks about President Roosevelt because that's the obvious pick for essentially somebody who might be, the most disabled. But I actually think the intellectual disability that would not allow somebody to be able to write, and then limit the person in memorization, limit the person in capacity to create and deliver speeches in a time where that was incredibly important. I mean, you're founding a nation. So anyways, guys, I hear Shadow whining in the background. We're going to go ahead and now transition over to getting a security update, specifically when it comes to the war in Ukraine with Russia. Obviously, if you guys have seen the pictures, the news has kind of stopped showing it because, there's many different reasons why. But the bottom line is much of Ukraine has been leveled, like leveled. And Russia just continues to pound them and pound them and pound them. But let's go through real quick, essentially, with the security excerpt, specifically with what's going on over there, and that would be our next step. Here we go, guys. All right, let's pull it up real quick. One seckaroo, and I hear Sweetie whining in the background. Let's see what we got here. Okay, good. Okay, let's see. We're going to go ahead and give him a call real quick and get him on the line. Here we go. One seckaroo. Now remember, this is an update as to what's going on. There have been talks about nuclear weaponry, specifically from the president of Ukraine. Howdy, good sir. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Good evening, Walter.
Good evening, good sir.
Thank you for allowing our team back out with you this week. Had some telemetry and comms issues last week, but I think we've conquered some of them, and hopefully this is clear. If not, by all means, let us know.
It sounds excellent.
Let us know.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Walk me through what's going on with Ukraine and Russia.
Wow. So just last, when we first started this back beginning of the year, and we were forecasting out and crunching data, we were able to do 4, 7, 10 days. Just since the start of this call, info is still coming in, where the United Nations Chief Commissioner was in Kyiv with President Zelensky, and the Russian military was actually bombing the city while they were standing there, almost in a direct statement of superiority or some sort of power, depending on who you live. And that's just broken the last maybe 30, 40, 50 minutes. So what we end up looking at from the Russian control and where they're heading, as we forecast quite some time ago, is they made a move back into the Donbass region, the Eastern Front, and took a lot of equipment and manpower with them for the second push, which was heavy. They used a lot of the Warner Group and Chesnyan Syrian mercenaries that had been used previously and understood what their mission was. Just in the last couple of hours, we have over 90% reliability and validity through the software that the steel mill, the Azov Steel in Mariupol, has fallen to Russia. The children and women and elderly that we were sheltered in the cavernous tunnels underneath miles of cavernous tunnels last we knew we're in safe hands and we're well protected throughout the week as we continue to monitor that through our resources. And just in the last very, very brief period of time, it appears that we have confirmation that it may have been a surrender by those remaining.
Wow.
Very, very unusual for Azov soldiers, Azov Battalion to surrender. We see the big move by Russia and trying to make their way west across Crimea. We've had episodes in Kherson. We've had episodes in Odessa. Their goal is to try and shut down all the seaports from basically Mariupol all the way down to Romania, if they can go that far. Transnistria, that little piece of property that runs between Moldova and Odessa and the backside of Poland, is going to be hotly contested over the next, I'll say, 72 hours, depending on who takes control and the movements they take. We have fighting all over the country. It's unbelievable. Kherson up and down. Kherson's up and down. But now we're starting to see countries that previously were not involved in a position either way, clearly moving weapons, parts, equipment, missiles in support or unfriendly support of one of the sides. Today, the President of the United States, Mr. President Biden, indicated he's looking for $33 billion with a B, millions of dollars worth of support for the Ukrainians. It was not broken up, at least the documents we were able to see, it was not broken up into equipment, aid, refugee care, food. We just couldn't get our eyes on it. It was just too big of a document, too quick. But he's asking for $33 billion. One of the weapons they are sending over is a highly accurate missile guidance system. And I don't know what country they're bringing it into. Our guys kind of are not looking that way right now to see where it's coming into and how it's getting in country for use. But again, a very reliable, reasonably cost rocket launching system with incredible accuracy. That was just announced within the last maybe 2 hours. And it continues to just make things very, very difficult here, domestically, overseas, wherever folks may be. Now is clearly a good opportunity, if you have an opportunity, to make contact with family or friends that are traveling, to ensure that they are aware of what's taking place in our world, not to ruin a vacation, a holiday, or a business trip, but just so they are not so engrossed in what they're partaking in that they fail to recognize their safety or the safety of the people that they're traveling with. Do we anticipate this extending into NATO countries? If by the end of the weekend this thing hasn't had a pretty solid cap or stop put in place, we're very concerned that this will just continue to move until we get closer to the May 9th date. And as we get closer, within, I'm going to say, 72, maybe 100 hours of that 9th date, we don't even know what to expect. All of our iconic folks with tremendous history in study, in politics and military maneuvers, and watching Putin grow up and his whole life, his families, and just processing all the information, and is just very distracting as well as very unsettling. We may have heard today that Mr. Putin is insisting anybody that wants petroleum or liquid natural gas from his country will have to pay in rubles and pay a bank that is accepting them somewhere in Russia. There's a strong move late this afternoon, early this evening, by countries that will not be blackmailed, who are indicating they are finding alternate resources for obtaining those petroleum and natural gas resources. Just don't want to be held at the stake for it. Today, China announced that they're no longer going to have an import on coal. There will be no longer an import tax on coal, and what they're trying to do is basically shore up their energy security, their ability to produce energy through coal in their country. Where do we see President Zelensky, the democracy, the troops surrounding leave Poland, the NATO borders, the UN borders? Where do we see this? We're really hoping what we're not going to see is a false flag. And just a real quick recap on that. False flags are where one country claims another country has done something to activate action, positive or negative, either on themselves or others. False flagging is old school. That's where he dresses up in that uniform, does something in the border that they're already on, and creates that under the impression that they did it in their country's name. And that's where you can start bringing in people who, say they tripped over the line, or they violated the law, or they violated the false flag rule and got caught. And then there's right now the saber rattling, as we'll call it, the pontificating, the "I'm going to scare you straight" stories coming from the mouths of global leaders is just really unique in these times. I think the line of today may be President Putin saying, if you violate the rules, we will respond with a lightning response. And I think I overheard some folks here throughout the day saying, what's a non-lightning response?
It's a light touch.
And, yeah, right. So you almost want to chuckle, but it's so sad because it's human lives, it's property. Right now, they're talking about $1 trillion in damage in the country of Ukraine just since the kickoff 60 some days ago on February 24th. So it's just horrific. China and Iran are putting together their own peace. You got South Korea yelling at North Korea, or North Korea yelling at South Korea. You have the container ships, and with China in lockdown due to what they're claiming is a health scare to a variant of COVID. The ports are not operating. $6 billion worth of domestic U.S. product that was supposed to come back on the ships to China was denied at boarding over the last 30, 45 days. There are more than 3 times the number of ships and containers sitting empty in the Chinese ports, and nothing's moving. So not only are they not manufacturing because there's nobody in the production facilities, there's also no way to get things in and out. And we're going to end up seeing that a little bit later than we thought in our supply chain here. And again, as we try and talk about each time we get together, is the day to start prepping or putting a few things aside for yourself, for your family, is today. The day after you get to the shelves and it's either not cost effective or no longer on the shelf is the day that's passed. So we did a review. Andrew did a review of our Brit friends who are following up basically from COVID and some of the episodes they've had domestically and the concerns they have regarding possible proximity to missile strikes, and what they need to do to safeguard themselves. And they're right on track. They've kind of figured it out. It's not quite COVID where you go out and buy all the toilet paper. Yeah. But again, picking up a few things at a time, understanding the need for water, fuel. Be highly aware of the type of fuel that you're either using in your vehicle, a vehicle you're renting, loaning, borrowing, and making sure whoever has a responsibility for that vehicle that you have half a tank if you can. Just keep it at that half tank or better level. If it's affordable, we recommend it. And printed map. having printed maps may be helpful. Like the ones that are stuffed in the glove box from those famous road trip guides the United States used to. One of the big organizations used to put it out, and you could keep the maps in your car. If you think you're going to travel in a reasonable area and you're familiar enough with the streets, one of the things that we ask you to consider when we say maps is, and when we look at the wildfires in the western portion of the United States, what we're seeing is people only knew one way in or one way out. And despite the distance to town or the distance out of their area, they were unfamiliar if a tree came down or they couldn't pass to a boulder, how to get from point A to point B. So we do recommend that even if it's only a statewide map with smaller roads, a country map, depending on where you're located, in the event that the GPS goes out, your phone doesn't work, and you need to go from point A to point B, at least you have the ability and the idea of how to travel. It's just something to keep in mind as we come into both hurricane season and we look at the weather situation out west and possibly our ability to go to a gas station that we had, think it has fuel for petrol, and ultimately decide that it's been closed and won't be reopening for a while. So just something to keep in mind. As far as May 9th, I think we've talked about this previously. It's considered Victory Day in a pretty significant event in Russia. We may recall seeing on news from years past the military equipment and men and women in uniform parading in the squares. And basically, it's the national importance to Russia. This is the date Soviet Union triumphed over Nazi Germany during World War II. So it's a big deal. I know for Mr. Putin, it's a very big deal, and it's just one of those things that as we move closer to that date, just to be aware, just be greater aware of what's taking place, both with you and your family, and if you have a company that has out of country or on a continent participants that you need to get on a call with or Zoom or communicate with. Look for that awareness that they're not doing so well, and just offer them just a moment of peace if you can between now and then, as this ramps up. It will be difficult for a lot of people globally. So back to the Azov plant in Mariupol, the Azov regiment. They thought they had about 600 wounded folks there. They had civilians that were injured, and they were trying to. It's an old movie. It's a Winston Churchill move called the Dunkirk, and it's that miracle of the French and British soldiers during a rescue operation, 1940. And they were hoping on this date, as they made moves, that truly Mr. Putin and his troops would keep the safe corridor open for the safe evacuation of the injured, the civilians, and anybody else. And right now, we're not hearing anything other than they've set their things down. If I get an update while we're on, hold on one second, please. Andrew, update if you guys. Thank you. So as soon as that comes across, or we get that SAT call, we'll dial in with it. One of the things that's a little bit frustrating to a lot of folks, at least internationally, that we're finding is they're now identifying Canadians, Brits, and other groups are starting to identify acts of genocide. And this is intentionally destroying a nation, a race, a religious group, killing people with or without purpose, children, and they're just going to get out any inhumane act against civilians. And back when NATO first started getting up and running, and they had military tribunals in Nuremberg, Germany, set up for Nazi officials for crimes against humanity. And this is not the acts of genocide. It's Chapter 2 of NATO, and basically condemns anybody who commits this act. And we're hearing the words again, and we're hearing it, in relationship to the Bucha and Mariupol and Kyiv and Kherson, the Donbass region. And what we think it's leading to is, will it get that far? I think if you don't discuss it, or if it's not present, it never gets discussed. But again, these are not regular. This is not the war where somebody's angry at somebody else, and everybody knows what they're fighting for. Speaking of fighting, the tanks that the Russian army has been using has been found to have a significant flaw in the armor in a certain area. They're also storing all their military shells inside the tank. Ukraine has figured out how to use a hobbyist-style drone, if you will, for dropping multi-part bombs right over the top and having the last one cook off to light the other bombs that are on top of the tank. Basically, it levels it, and then everything inside cooks off, and that's the end of the front of the tank and the one behind it and all the way down the row. So again, just using the resources they have, similar to the mud we talked about, where they couldn't keep the military equipment on the road, and then it would freeze, and just getting out of hand. So again, the troops continue to do what they have. Mr. Zelensky, President Zelensky, continues on insisting on more aid for his country, and it looks like a lot of countries, Italy, Turkey just closed their airspace, I think, yesterday evening to Russia, and now it's everybody involved. We have all the navies involved, all the submariners involved, all the aircraft involved. Whose parts are on that aircraft? Just how they're keeping track of each other in that airspace, and it's not good. It's not good. Domestically, I think in the United States, we're hearing it more out west and in the big cities as far as limits on everything from baby formula and baby products to over-the-counter medication, where people are starting to enhance their purchases or consider their purchases for storage. Please be aware that if you're in that situation and you have a need, please consider everything from the food bank to religious organizations, whether you're a member or not of that particular organization. They have a food center, gifting food center, and stay abreast of what you need. Just stay abreast. Same thing with durable medical supplies, everything from needles to CPAP equipment, positive airway equipment. Be aware of where your products come from. I was told earlier today that a lot of the CPAP equipment actually British manufacturing or German manufacturing. And I said, oh, okay. If they're not manufacturing or we can't get it to the countries that they need it to get to, it becomes difficult. It becomes difficult. And again, ensuring that you're ready to travel and you have a bag that has weight that you can handle, and again, not overdoing it. It's just making sure that you can kind of go somewhere for half a dozen hours and a couple of bottles of water, some protein bars are on the counter somewhere or wherever you have available, and half a roll of toilet paper and flashlight, and you're good to go out the door for the most part. Do try and take care of your animals if you have the ability to plan for them as well. Never considered animal food off of a farm to be an issue, but I guess that's going to be something as well as some of the processing plants, either in the United States or North America, start having issues with production. Speaking of animal production, we are now up to 50 million chickens or turkeys have been put down in 28 states since February 8th when the bird flu was found in Indiana. Just read how one of the largest in Iowa put down 5 million birds. Wow. They brought 250 of their employees in to put them down to make sure it was handled properly. And when the job was complete after, I'm going to say a few weeks, they were all laid off.
Wow.
So, don't know how many they employed. I want to say about 200, maybe 250, but in the middle of our country. So, as you get places and you can't understand why that chicken sandwich is so much, or why that chicken, in the case, the ground turkey, ground chicken, whatever your pets may eat, whatever you may eat, and the prices are going up. It's not 7% inflation. I think we forecast between 10 and a quarter and 14 and a quarter right now, depending on the part of the world that you're in. But again, just being aware of. There used to be Sam's Club. That's US. Sam's Club is US. Yeah, Walmart maybe. The Sam's Club. Yeah, Walmart. They're nodding their head. It used to be if you saw something on the shelf and it was not the right season, you bought it anyway, because when you came back in season, it would be gone. Same kind of philosophy. You're not sure whether, will that pasta still be there? Will that toothbrush, whatever, personal sanitation, whatever it is, still be there next week? Maybe. Don't know if it'll be the same price. And then I had a big eye opener this week. The dollar store is no longer a dollar.
Yeah.
Somebody said it's 25% increase. So that's a lot of money. I said, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So, again, coffee is on the rise. You'll see fertilizer issues creeping into the coffee market, Central and South America, the coffee market. As we struggle to figure out how to get the wheat in the ground in the United States and how we get the materials offshore. And came across a company, German-based company, ASML. They produce microchips, and they need palladium, which comes from Russia, and neon gas, the microchips, which comes out of Russia, Ukraine. And you think we had a problem with automobiles and commercial autos previously without these microchips and TVs and electronics? This doesn't resolve. It just sets us that much further back. Don't want to be the doom and gloom guy. Hopefully we can resume this and find some balance, some global balance. Hopefully the folks that have been elected to represent us seriously understand the impact it has domestically here. And again, just be ready for yourself. Be aware. The other thing too, if find out, garage sale is another great place to look for things like all-weather radio that has a hand crank, garage sale, estate sale, thrift shops. Hey, you see something that fits what you're looking for, and it seems to work. Okay, so the dollar store, dollar quarter. Candles, be very careful with candles. They have that tendency to start fires, but maybe an LED candle may sustain you for as long as you need if the power goes out. But again, working with a team, finding identifiable partners in your community or in your arena, either social or medical or educational circles, and find out how you can rely on your skill may be value. As Walter, I think, like I was just saying, you're reviewing the past presidents and some of their issues or reported issues. You never know when that is overcome by somebody else in your group, and what you have to offer is something that they don't have already, and that's that community. So as we start to look into other countries, and we start to look at Belarus and Romania, and just taking Hungary, Turkey, we take it all the way out and keep talking about. As we start to do this, find your group so you can be settled and comfortable with what they may or may not have to offer. And now I think it's that moment for that bonus question.
Okay. I've got a good one for you, because I was thinking last week about what I wanted to ask, and then I found an even better one. So here's the tough question that I have, and I know I always bring forward just a really difficult. So here's the thing: Russia has produced media about potentially bombing New York. Russia has produced comments that you got to die something about this whole idea to its own Russian people when it comes to nuclear war. The U.S., some people say it's not likely. Some people say we need to be prepared, and it is likely. They keep talking about deterrence and basically creating some sort of big bad bomb that would make Russia even more afraid. But my question to you is, beyond us just bombing them and making their banks suffer, do we have any technology that can actually protect our cities, reduce an explosion if it does occur? Do we have any shields? Do we have any lasers? Do we have anything other than them being afraid of us bombing them to actually deter nuclear weaponry?
I wish I had the camera on, but I can't do it from here because they're holding up different pieces of signs that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
The group here, different groups are holding up, and it says, "You cannot confirm nor deny."
Well, right. Right.
Got it, guys. And then now they're quietly applauding. Yeah, okay. One guy's clapping with his cell phone in his hand.
Yeah.
We know that guy.
Yeah.
So, truth be told, I think one of the things that a lot of the military leaders that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, just brilliant minds, just absolutely brilliant minds. One of the things that they are just fascinated about and don't understand is why everyone when we say everybody, stereotypically they're speaking, are forecasting, you know what? I'm going to call you now because in 10 minutes, I'm going to bomb that building and you should get out.
Yeah.
How does that work? They're like, this isn't the art of war. The art of war is mission driven. It's tactical. It's comprehensive. It's counter espionage. It's a million things. But ultimately, I think what we're starting to see is, look, we already know that Russia has the hypersonic missile.
Super fast.
And
Yeah.
we also know, we do know that. They have claims that they have more. They claim about 6,200 nuclear warheads to our 5,500. How many does it take to erase a city? We went from the mother of all bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, something that's 500 times stronger, that fits on the head of a small missile going up from your space coast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about the threats, and we talked about the difference between tactical nuke, which is a small radius other than the cloud and the debris field, but the actual impact area is very defined and very small, as opposed to the baby mother or father of all bombs. And when that comes up, it's a different story. So there's quite a bit of mapping that's available to the public, and you can kind of go out and look at the United States, or you can look at Canada, or you can look at England or the islands or wherever you may be from, where your family's from, to determine if that's where you kind of want to still hang out right now until this is resolved. There are parts of this country and other countries that have subterranean locations that, unless it's been cleared by their military or their government, still remains a secret. It looks like nothing but big open space. And then countries that have everything right out there where you can see it, and they just keep replacing it. When we come to the tactical nuclear side, the comment 2 days ago, and it's not in the notes here today, guys, sorry, was the use of a tactical nuclear device by Russia does not require a nuclear response.
Okay.
So realistically, from a non-emotional point of view, we processed that through a bunch of times, and it kept coming back with a high level of validity that's true. There are other things that may be imparted that, although that's been done, does not take away the responsibility, the danger, the fear, but does not necessarily automatically activate every nuclear weapon in the world.
I mean, that would be...
And it's an interesting position.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? So
yeah.
Here we say, oh, I don't want my world to end due to a nuclear weapon. There's a lot of information available publicly on, depending on the distance you are from wherever that hit, you may have anywhere from up to 3-week containment inside your building, home, wherever you're at when this thing goes down, up to not having an issue at all and going right outside because it was such great distance in small magnitude and the wind's not blowing your way. Medically, it's not, I'm not going to say it's not, I'm not the doctor, but I'm not the doctor in this group, but ultimately it's viewable. Obviously, you should be looking at it, but when I say viewable, sustainability is viewable, depending on where you're at. It's just frustrating. It's just getting people to say, it's easier to say something about it than look into it.
Yeah.
But if you look into it, there's some real strong pieces that give you some peace of mind and allow you to understand if something goes off, I'll say, in the country of X,
mm-hmm.
and you are 4,000 miles from the country of X, and the wind's not going to follow around to you. You feel sorry for the country of X and those people. But it does not require your country or weapons countries to use a nuclear device to stop the second one, unless it's evident. And it really took a lot for our group to get around it. It really did. Because we're emotionally, hey, look, when you work in certain careers, you become like-minded, you try to leave the emotion out, and ultimately we find that the emotion trickles back in. But in this particular case, one of the folks working today said this is very similar to the world against one.
So, and I guess my big thing here is this, at the end of the day, when I look at this situation, I think to myself, okay, if Russia does something big involving a nuclear interaction, then NATO gets involved, the chess game ends. If basically a smaller country goes after another country that's not a NATO country, potentially as a nuclear weapon, even if it wasn't directly from their government, then NATO may or may not get involved, but somehow the chessboard still ends up with the Russia v. America v. China scenario. Now, I know a lot of CIA guys and FBI guys, they're always pushing the identity of, the best time to do something is the classic theory of buying at an auction. So person A buys the item at an auction at a low price because person B didn't make an offer and keep bidding it up. Person A walks out of the door, person B walks up to him and says, hey, I'll buy that from you for a third more than what you paid. Person A then says, cool, here you go. So for me, in that ideology, in that kind of thinking, I feel like what we're doing right now is just, the United States' new protocol is letting Russia use up its resources so that person B, whether it's a major country or not, can take advantage some way. How could other countries take advantage of Russia in a way that would basically, essentially benefit them in a massive financial or strategic? I mean, even Ukraine is starting to hit Russia targets, but they're not person B. So who is person B in this equation?
So when we look at global markets, and I'm talking about economic markets, which is the whole how we make the world go round, I guess. The reason why we brought up the Chinese ports and the container ships and the lack of trade commerce flowing freely from the United States to China and China to the United States and all the other ports, moving ships out of Long Beach, California, and Los Angeles, California, and bringing them in through ports in the state of Florida and Louisiana, trying to get some of that stuff offloaded and get it back to the people. And the cost of shipping is just incredible. There's some 1800s rules as far as displacing the amount of money for not moving the containers at the right pace. So when we talk about just the shipping side of it, who's making money? Okay, so if China shuts down and they're not running the ports and we can't get product in and out of certain countries, and it can end up in it, is it a boomerang effect? Will it snap back? Yeah, probably not until maybe this time next year, if not later, from what we can see. But there are people who will be investing into global markets right? So we're not getting palladium or microchips out of Russia due to the sanctions. Who else has got it? Who's sitting on palladium? What's the price of palladium? Who can move palladium? So there's always a player or group of players, I should say, financial players, that are looking for that. Like I said, nobody's bidding, so somebody's going to fall on it and figure out how to make it work. But you don't know how many companies they own, what the diversification of those companies are, what countries they're in, what the materials are used for. Well, nobody wanted it, and that's where the financial gain comes from. There is a guy on our team that when the ruble went from 0.010 and then it was like, did you see how much it went up? And we all looked at him like, what are you talking about? He says, it's a big jump. And he looks at it from percentages only. He's not looking at the picture or anything other than okay, if you have enough of that, it's like Bitcoin. I shouldn't say Bitcoin, but some of the theories behind Bitcoin. It's a non-tangible. You buy in. It has a value based on what people are willing to pay. Who's going to make money? I know a little bit about it. I'm getting schooled by a couple of really bright people here regarding Vietnam and the recovery of Vietnam after the Vietnam War and the rebuilding of Vietnam and how beautiful it is today, and from folks that we speak to pretty regularly and share their world up until very recently. And I wonder if we'll see that big rebuilding of Ukraine in that same capacity, where somebody comes in with Uncle Walter's construction company.
Sure.
And comes in, sure, rebuilds $1 trillion worth of country. The airports have fallen. Who's going to get the airports up and running? And there's contractors and I'll say former military from all over the world, and that's what they did. The operating engineers, and they would come in and, you need a bridge over that creek? We got one. You need a new runway? Yeah, we got that too. So I think there's money to be made. It's not what we focus on here in our group. Ours is kind of a little bit different, and it's grounded in some strong integrity and ethics. And we like to believe that we have to find a small light moment from time to time. It's internal, not at anybody's expense. But we have, like I said, some of the best and brightest military minds and think tanks engaged regularly. And here, like you mentioned, familiar with a lot of folks in the intelligence industry, and ultimately what we're finding is they'll debate amongst themselves because it's not that fluid yet. It's just not that fluid. All right, last bonus.
All right, so here's my follow-up to that question. And I mean, I like that, technology that could turn all nukes on, things like that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the president has a few places that he can go, whether he's taking the special train under the White House, or he ends up at the mountain, or he's not even in this country. He's flying in Air Force One somewhere. Where is the safest place at this point with the current capacity of nuclear hydrogen bomb explosions for the president to be if a nuclear bomb were to go off near him?
It is a great question, and historically, when you look back, whether it's a military facility, whether it's in the mountains, whether it's subterranean at the White House, in the tunnelways leading to different buildings. Very recently, I don't have anybody signing me right now. Either the History Channel or Discovery Channel talked about the capabilities of Air Force One and ancillary aircraft, and some of the things that they learned just in this most recent aircraft that came right out of the September 11th tragedies, as far as radio waves and altitude and communications. And here we thought, man, this is 2000, 1990, 2000. Like, we should have the president, man. He should have, like, it should all work. And
yeah,
there were moments that it didn't. Ultimately, the learn from this has been tremendous information in communications and materials, fueling, oxygen, medical, escorts, planes that look like that plane, planes that don't look like that plane, and how long can that aircraft stay above the earth? And without revealing, obviously, I don't have the inside on the construction, but it's about an hour either on History Channel or Discovery Channel. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely. First of all, some of us were dumbstruck when we saw it because we didn't believe that President Bush would not have it on the plane ready. When he needed it, but things have been made. Technology is different. We just had an example where a private citizen using his satellites corrected a GPS problem put down by Russia. And Elon Musk was able to use the electromagnetics of his satellites in low Earth orbit to make a change that would have taken months through government process, admittedly. And just by able to spin his personal equipment around, or that he controlled, using electromagnetics, he was able to have that equipment re-engage for GPS purposes. And just incredible. So when we think about the President of the United States and Congress and who flies, who doesn't, escorts, I think September 11th was a big eye-opener. I think this new equipment that's been partially revealed and shared with the public, and like I said, available on a couple of those channels. I'm sure it's in repeats, and that's I think, yeah, I think that's an interesting piece, a real interesting piece. Don't know how many other countries maintain that type of aircraft equipment and have the financial ability to maintain that type of equipment. yeah, it's I don't think we want them on boats. I don't think we want them using the oligarchs' boats or anything like that, right? So they figured out where it's safest for him to be, and God bless the Secret Service and their mission. Like, it's a very difficult process for them. I think we're there.
Perfect. Well, sounds good, sir. I was gonna say Mars because I mean, hey, you can't go wrong with this. But we gotta get there. We got the red planet has many. So, but anyways, good sir. Thank you so much for coming on the live. That was excellent. Hopefully, I'll be able to catch up with you next week, and we'll keep rolling through these updates because this is so incredibly important. And I wanted to do a history update on how America basically treated veterans through the different decades, even centuries, when it comes to their army, arms, etc. And that America has had a long history of giving out veteran benefits for the civilians. So this is incredibly important. And what I'd like to do is talk about kind of the future of what would happen if there was some sort of nuclear interaction or just a war that involved the U.S., and what would then potentially happen to those veterans who were involved with it, and how the U.S. might change its design with veteran benefits and also how we treat them in comparison to essentially World War I, World War II, Civil War, and all these different giant landmarks throughout our timeline as a country being formed into what it is now. But anyways, good sir, I will catch you later. You have a wonderful night, and thank you so much for coming live with us tonight.
Be well, be safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, good sir. Bye-bye. So, guys, I love those updates because here's the thing. You're actually getting right in line with a group of people who have an update specifically on what's going on between that transaction. On Earth, there are few things as important as what's going on there. Sure, there's, quantum mechanics and how it's going to change so many things with how we interact with computers and how we travel. And sure, there's, automated driving, yay, but nothing is in comparison to what's going on with Russia. And specifically, in addition to that, the Ukraine and also NATO. Because once China and the US and all these different places get involved, the US, for many of these very large interactions in war, has been able to stay out of it in the sense of direct conflict on American soil. Now, obviously, the earlier, the Civil War, things like that, that was a different story. But going into the more modern wars, we always kept everything away from our base home ground, our stomping ground, right? I don't think that'll happen if NATO nations get involved going forward. I don't think America is going to be able to keep all of that somehow off of the territory of the U.S. Now, with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed that. We're going to take a couple of phone calls real quick to go ahead and fill in the details here and then keep rolling through. I do have to go to USPS tonight. I do have to do some recording stuff, but real quick, this is the phone number if you want to call in to go ahead and ask some disability questions, or you can always ask them in the comment section, and I'll just go ahead and basically respond. Looks like Shirley's getting a peanut butter sandwich. That's excellent. Let's see. All my favorite foods from now on, getting an ice cream cone. Very good. So basically, I'm going to open up for about 3 minutes. If nobody calls in, I'm going to close the show because I have to go do. Somebody's calling in. I spoke too soon. All right, hold on. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Knott, Disability Resolution PA. Would you like me to answer a specific question or run hearing questions with you? And remember to use a fake name throughout this. Go ahead.
Hi, I had a question about disabled adult child benefit application. I applied for an application over a year ago. It was like February of last year. Mm-hmm. And it says on my application status that it only takes 30 days to get approved. I know it's a little more for them to do the whole process or whatever after your initial application.
Yeah.
That's what it says on my thing. But it's been over a year now. They contacted me. I called you a while back. They contacted me saying that they wanted me to get the medical paperwork because they couldn't for some reason, and they only go back 7 years or something like that. And so I sent in everything that I had, and that was in February, and I still haven't heard anything. It says it's still like it said that it was being reviewed, and now it says that it should, whatever it says, it changed, but it's pretty much saying the same thing, that it's still in that process. Is that normal considering
So here's
gave
the
them
thing.
sufficient?
Yeah, that's going on right now. A lot of the same people that are used for all these different adjudications, whether it's SSI, SSDI, DAC benefits, auxiliary benefits, a lot of them are just stuck with tons and tons of people applying right now. So any and all timeline standards of like, oh, I can get found disabled in 2 weeks. None of that happens anymore unless they're dying.
Yeah.
You know, it's just unless they're going to be dead in 2 weeks, that's it. So the bottom line here is that when you're fighting a DAC claim like this, so first off, they couldn't get the medical records. Usually, I'm assuming this is why, they'll send out an 827 at DDS level. And DDS level, they don't get a response. They send out another, and then they send out another. Months and months go by, and then they reach out to the claimant and say, hey, if you can get them, cool. If not, we can get them. What you need to go and request from the DDS rep is for the federal government to go ahead and subpoena those records as part of the adjudication and request that they be submitted. And put a little bit of threat there. You can also reach out to HHS and say that medical facility.
Even though it's been over 7 years.
Oh, then you're stuck because they don't have to hold on to them for more than that. Yeah. So kind of the bottom line with that situation. Oh, so wait a minute. Are you trying to attach? So you've got how many years?
I'm already on disability.
How many years back are you going with this thing? What's your age now? Yeah.
I'm 30. I'm going to be 37, and I've been on disability since I was 18.
Yeah, I've always hated doing those types of representation for those claims because you've got to prove. So how many years back is that to 22? You got 7 to 30, and then you need another 8. So you're looking at 15. You got to prove that 15 years ago you were disabled, which is tough to collect.
But me being put on disability by Social Security at 18 doesn't prove that I was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that does. That can be used as an identifying factor.
But then they said they lost my file. Disability said Social Security said they lost my file. So, but the paper that she sent me when she was asking for documents, it said that if they don't receive anything, that they'll have to go ahead with their processing of the claim, and I'll probably most likely found not to be approved. But then it also said that if I'm found not to be approved for that, I can also be found not disabled, period, because of that, and they can take away my benefits. Is that true? So
essentially, let me do the first question, then we'll do the second thing.
Sorry.
The first thing is so when the SSA loses records, which they've lost a lot of, I don't know how there's been everything from fires to digital, goats. It's just everything. Yeah. So I guess what I would say is this: the best thing to do is to go and get a statement, from the doctor that you were seeing back then, as to the status that which you were, if they remember you, and they can write up an actual letter or a statement or whatever. And that's the best thing to do because that's the only way you can tie it back to them. Is if they can create that record. Another thing to keep in mind is that
that's what I sent them, though. Yeah. I sent them my psychiatric evaluation when I started into the adult program when I switched from the children's program to the adult program at that place.
Yeah.
I sent them my whole. So shouldn't that be good enough or no?
Well, what's on it?
No. Just my whole diagnosis. Why I was. Pretty much what's on it is what the Social Security Administration used to find that I was disabled back when I was 18.
Sometimes people have multiple doctors, and that doctor that you think is like the big home run hitter isn't. So I would check on that first. See what doctors you had, which one was the hitter. That basically gave you the best evidence. Another thing to keep in mind is
Okay.
that 15 years ago, these doctors were part of the high-tech conversion. So some of these offices may still have some of the old discs or diskettes or the old CDs,
Okay.
because when they converted over from basically a paper system over to a digi system, they usually have a backup somewhere of their old records on a DVD or multiple DVDs or a hard drive.
Okay.
They almost always do that because they want to have it just for the purposes of courts. If there's ever an
Yeah.
issue where the doctor
Yeah.
gets sued. So,
Mhm.
kind of the bottom line is
And if
there's
they have to hospitalize someone again, they have the records to go
right,
by.
exactly. So I would do that. I would look into seeing how you can attach to those documents. The other
Okay.
thing is, it's not your fault that they lost the records. So, kind of the bottom line is while you have the duty to prove that you were disabled, you did.
Mhm.
And now essentially the guardians of those records have lost them. Now
Mhm.
which is why I always tell people when you're trying to shoot for DAC benefits to always keep a backup copy somewhere. But um, the next thing I would ask you is what other forms of evidence show that you were disabled back in the day that you haven't maybe thought about, such as things outside of medicine, maybe like a school and going to the getting the nurse's office notes, maybe like
Okay.
application for back in the day a wheelchair or a cane crutch or
Like I
something.
had to go into a special program. I got let go or released from regular high school and put in a special program because of my issues, but then I was let go from that school as well. So there'd be documentation there. Would that be something?
Yeah, I would grab that. I would also grab.
Okay.
Did you ever have any hospitalizations that were emergency
Yes.
room hospital? Okay, so I would go see.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would make an appointment to go talk to the records division of that particular hospital and ask them, do you have any way to tap into records from back in the day? And they almost always have records going that far back somewhere on a disk. It's just
a state hospital, especially, would probably, right?
yeah, and here's the thing, like they usually
Okay.
tell people no, blah blah blah, we don't have it, 7 years, yada yada. But
Yeah.
what they're usually looking for is some sort of payment from you to their facility to cover the hours and the time, usually at like
Yeah.
30, $35 an hour for somebody to go and just basically look. And
Yeah.
and that's what you're
It's
going to run
worth
into.
paying.
Right. It's a money thing. All these every company
Yeah.
out there is struggling right now. Like if people think like companies have extra money right now, they don't. Everybody's struggling right now.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
another thing to consider is something that you might have done in like an internship. So did you ever work for any companies back then, or do like a side internship or like a fun activity?
I did a voc. I started going to nursing. I tried to do nursing school and I had to go to a vocational program to get approved for them to help me pay for that because they wanted to try and assist me.
Mhm.
Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I would use. And why did you not make it? And can you get basically
Okay.
the notes of your attendance and when you stopped? You were
Okay.
18, so were there any issues with the law? Did you get in trouble with any of the sheriffs or the police? Any police reports? You were 18, so we're talking about
That sort of stuff doesn't make you look bad, though.
who cares? You were disabled.
Okay, I just always assumed that they would like think I was evil or something because of some of those things,
Well, let me explain. I represent claimants who have attempted to shoot schools up, which is horrible, but they still get on disability benefits.
Well, it's just they frown upon if you smoke and cigarettes and stuff, like that. So I thought having a record would be
but
if not more so.
But think about this: smoking and continuous repetitive criminal conduct are two very different things. Somebody chooses through in part addiction to continue to smoke, but when it comes to doing high level criminal activity, I think most people would say, if I have a choice to have to quit cigarettes or go rob a bank every month, right? And those are my two addiction options. I'm going to choose smoking because that's not as big of a deal. robbing a bank every month, you could potentially get shot. You could potentially, get a lot of money and be happy. You got two options, but, kind of the bottom line is at the end of the day, like, I would look for any and all, obviously get your statements from your witnesses, your neighbors, your friends, your family, your coworkers, your past, academia professionals, your teachers, your professors, your deans, your whatever. Did you take any specialty stuff? Like, were you doing horseback riding? Were you doing a sport? Can you get a letter from them saying that you did a great job, or, you couldn't make it through the season, blah, blah, blah. Get that stuff. Sure. But,
Okay.
any and all evidence to show, because remember, your bar of proving that you were disabled back then is 99% complete, because they already adjudicated you to be disabled. All you need now is the little auxiliary stuff to just bolster that a little bit. So
because she told me that didn't count, that was irrelevant because they didn't have my file from then.
No. That 100% counts.
That's what she said.
Then she's wrong. You call her up and tell her she's wrong. She's 100% wrong. You can tell her I said that.
Nicely, but
you can literally, that's 100% wrong. If they lose your file, they don't get to say that you're not magically disabled now. That's not how the program works.
Okay.
I mean, that's offensive. When I hear that, my head is spinning, because that's one of those disinformation things that they should not be doing. I mean, think about the horrors of that, the ethical consequences of doing that. So somebody is disabled back in the day, right? And then 15 years later, the SSA says, you know what, we lost your, pull away. We're going to pull your benefit. What? They're like, yeah, you're not disabled anymore because we don't have the. So, and keep in mind too, it is the government's job to retain the information to prove what they adjudicated back in the day. They lose that. It's not your fault. It's never been the claimant's fault when they lose the information. So that to me is like my head spinning when I hear that. If a judge heard that, if an ALJ heard that, I think, I can't, say on their behalf, but I think that they would be very surprised. It flies in the face of what a lot of the SSA stands for, which is trying to get people benefits, trying to help them out, trying to improve their life by getting them the things that they need to be able to survive. And for somebody to say, well, maybe you were disabled back then, maybe you're not, maybe, it's not proof enough. That basically spits in the face of all the people who were adjudicating claims 15, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
So,
that
but
makes sense.
another thing that you might want to look into, other than getting a time machine with a cool little capsule,
Have one of those laying around?
They're cheap, but they're just not cheap in this decade. You get a couple more decades from now, they're going to be so cheap. You get to pick your color suit that you want. You can even get an Avengers patch.
Awesome. I want pink. Sign me up.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be really great. They're really fitted too, so like you look good in the picture. But
for our kids, it'll be great.
Are you kidding me? They'll abuse the hell out of it. They'll come back and be like, that's when mom was all messed up on, driving those fancy, cool cars with high, or they'll come back and be like super woke on us. They'll be like, you like gasoline vehicles? And we're like, yeah, that's all we have. Yeah. Or they'll come back and they'll be like, your car doesn't have fins? It doesn't fly? What's wrong? Yeah, man.
I find it funny. They don't even. Some kids don't even know what like an actual house phone is now. That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. I had to explain to a claimant the other day, a young, it's like a 15-year-old, what a house phone was. And the weird thing is, and here's the crazy part: the cord wasn't the thing that he had a problem with. It was the fact that
that's what usually is.
Right. I was, it's got a cord. Well, how does it? The signal travels through the cord. Why would you need a cord to travel signal? Like, aren't they just all? And I was like, well, they are now. I mean, yeah. And once again, it's just young kids being ultra woke and being all, prissy about like what the world. But the funny thing was, he did not get that the phone lived on the wall, and that was super weird for him. And he was like, well, then how do you take it down? I was like, well, you don't. You just leave it there. And he's like, well, what happens when you go driving? What do you do with it? And I was like, you just leave it there. And he's like, well, then how do people reach you? And I was like, They don't. That's why America was a better place back then. That's why we had cooler cars back then. Yeah.
My phone wasn't working because I dropped it in water, and I needed to call someone, and I was out and about, and I was like, where's our payphone? Where can I find a payphone?
Right.
And I finally, driving around forever, I found one, and they don't work anymore. Even if you do find one, they don't work. I was shocked.
They just steal quarters. That's all they do. And at this point, you need like full on dollar coins just to use the damn thing. It's not good.
Oh my word.
Yeah. No, it's Remember when they would collect? Somebody would call you with like that shitty like, hey, it's me. And then it's like, do you want to accept this collect call? And you're like, then you had to like do this like weigh and balance thing. Do I want to pay for this human being to just tell me something I already know? You know, I'm ready from the skating.
Out of bed.
Right. I love that though. That was remember the skating rings? So you
those are the good old days.
Those are the good old days. You call your parents up, Mom, I busted my knee on the skating ring, and my parents, they'd be like, well, okay, so bye. What?
Well, you learned your lesson then, didn't
you? Exactly. And then remember rollerblades came out, and all of God, jeez. Do people still roll?
I tried those a little while ago again, and that was I tried a pair, and I was like, I acted like I didn't know what I was doing. My daughter was watching me, and I started going down the hill, and I was like, oh no, what do I do? And she was like, I don't even know what you're on. How am I supposed to help? Like, she had no idea what they were.
She would just throw a phone at you and be like, save her. She'd be like, But seriously,
I had a card phone with the cord and everything. Isn't it? So I was pretty cool back then with that.
Yeah.
But
isn't it weird that we don't have motorized rollerblades? Like, wouldn't that make sense? Like, hey, I need to go to the store.
Oh no, they don't have I was gonna say those little ones that pop out of your shoes, but those aren't really.
That's what we need. We need huge wheel rollerblades. Just silly big off-road wheel rollerblades that are motorized. I mean, imagine
Elon. I'm sure he'll figure it out.
Imagine the lawsuits of the 5-year-olds that would crack their head open using those amazing lawn dart of toys. I'm open for it.
I tried one of those electric scooters. I got it for one of those for my daughter for Easter a couple years ago, and I was trying to show her how it worked, and I took it out and I hit some sand and thing went out from under me. I was so embarrassed. I went like over the handlebars, and I like immediately got up, even though I was in pain, and I was like, did anyone see that? No, thank God.
It's funny too. People think guys are the only ones when they get hurt that have to do that fake I'm fine stuff. But women do it even more, even more so. Like you guys could be bleeding, you could lose a foot, and you would still get up and be like, "I'm fine, everything's okay," and then you would cry for like an hour later. But in that 5 minutes where you walk into the room, on the way to the bathroom to go get a Band-Aid, holding onto your foot, you would be like, "I'm good. I G.I. Jane this." Although I have to be careful with that. I don't know where Will is. But yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, indeed, that's. Yeah, but it's just it's a game of finding any evidence that might have existed back in the day to prove. But look, you get a denial; it's not a big deal. Just appeal it until you get to a hearing and you get an actual judge working on it. That's your end goal here. Is if you get some bad news, just get a judge on board. That way, they can use because remember the DDS reps are not judges. Their whole thing is collect medical evidence, send it to the MCPC, get a report completed, with your medically determinable impairments, an explanation as to what's going on with you, just to get the report completed so that they can send it to their boss and move the case along. They're not knowledgeable. I mean,
I just had a what is it, a CDR this past year too.
Sure.
So I would think that they would have had all of but they didn't even reach out to my psychiatrist or anything for any information when they did that. So I thought that was odd.
That is odd.
Considering they said they didn't have my file or anything. Do you know what I mean? Stuff doesn't add up a lot with them, but
you understand too. They're trying to mass hire people right now. They don't have enough people.
Yeah. I get it. It takes Social Security a long process under good circumstances. So I understand.
That's a good way to put it. The Social Security Administration, when they're doing good, when the music's playing and they're on the riding rink and they're going around on their cool little, what do they call those? The with the
motorized scooter.
Yeah, with their motorized scooters and their cool, like in their 80s, like, super colorful spandexy cool clothing around the arena
And
thing.
their side ponytails.
Yeah, and there's like hardcore like Queen rock is playing, and like everybody's like wee, and they're like shaking their hands up in the air, doing like God, we were so cool, but at the same time the most lame generation. So,
Acid wash pants.
yeah.
Stuff,
The tie-dye shirts.
You know what's funny though? It's all the stuff that I wore in like high school and stuff that my like parents were like, oh, we used to wear that. It's coming back now. Now, our stuff is starting to come back a little bit. I noticed this summer.
Yeah.
This spring, it's starting to come back again. So they were right.
People are trying to be so cool that they've actually had to reach back to when we were overly cool. Like when we had like ridiculous hair, we had 3 popped collars, like, the full on like 1980s power moves. Like, holy cow. Yeah. God, those days were just different. They were just, it's like, what was it? It was Arnold
Kids
Schwarzenegger.
played with sticks outside. Like,
Yeah.
Like,
It's just an amazing time when I think back to it. But, another thing too to remember is that back then, the medium in which things were stored was it was usually like a hard format. So whether it was paperwork or it was a disc or something, those hospitals always have a doctor that owns them, and somewhere in their study is a drawer that's just filled with these diskettes. And I'm telling you, your
I
stuff.
would imagine you would want that for lawsuits.
Yeah.
You want.
It's there.
It's like an insurance policy, really.
Yeah, it's there somewhere. One of them has it. It's just you might have to actually talk to the owner to get a hold of it. But yeah, I would do that. Oh, what was the second question, by the way? Yeah.
They said that if I got denied for adult child benefits, that they shut all my disability off because being denied for that means that their original decision wasn't correct in finding me disabled when I was 18, so they could take all my benefits away.
Yeah, but they're not going to, because remember, you have to be judged from the legal standard that they used back then to see if you still meet the legal standard of that year in which you were found disabled. It's not the new standard. They adjudicate you at that. It's an appeal. No, it's not like what's the standard in 2022. It's the standard of when you were found disabled 15, 20 years ago.
That.
Yeah, no, the standard back then was super liberal. Like, there didn't need to be nearly as severe a situation for some. You could have some mild to moderates and still make it through. It was a different time. You're going to be fine in that regard. But yeah, let me know what happens. I'm curious, and if you do get to a hearing, obviously you're probably going to need an attorney to go ahead and work on it. But let me know how things go, and then we'll kind of catch up from there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful night.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Perfect, guys. So that was ironic. Like right as I was saying, if nobody calls within 3 minutes, I'm gonna sneak out and go to the USPS and mail off a bunch of stuff. But the bottom line is, I'll do one more phone call. Although honestly, I'm super tired. I'm so tired that my body feels chubby, but at the same time feels like empty. So I don't know if you guys have ever reached that level of tired. I think a lot of military people have, especially when they're like running all day and then not running, except my version is sitting in a chair all day and then still sitting in a chair all day. So, but anyways, so yeah, for the person that was upset about me making fun of tie-dye, I apologize. I know that we have some preferences and some standards, and I was below the standard there. Anyways, okay, cool. So you got a short form. Awesome. Anyways, guys, I'm going to count it down. If nobody calls in to the phone number within the next 10 seconds, I am going to go ahead and end for the night and go do the other stuff I have to do. So bottom line, let's count it down. Here we go. 10, 9, 8. I'm going to type a wrong number here. 7, right? 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Guys, celebration. I'm going to go and relax. and then go to USPS. I will catch you later. You have a wonderful night. Thanks so much for being part of the show. I'm sorry it loaded and then wouldn't allow me to join. It was like I was being sabotaged by the thing, but bottom line is it's okay. I still got to do the show. So I'll catch you a little bit later. Have a wonderful night, and we'll go from there. Howdy, Jimmy. Howdy, howdy. Okay, Guardian, I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.